Justin, I ask you to welcome you back to Indiana. I know you're a Hoosier, so nice to see you.
Great. Thank you all. So as Richard mentioned, I'm a Hoosier. I'm from Indianapolis, but I'm here representing today work that's going on in New York City, where I'm the head of the Public Design Commission. But we were asked to also give a bit of background. So my background professionally is in architecture, urban design, and urban planning. But my background is also really as just a person that loves cities. And so this image that I'm sharing is from the Flanner House, which is an organization in Indianapolis. It was a Black community development organization that did a lot of great work in the city. And I always put it in my presentations because it talks about really what our work and our challenges are. It says, what is it about? About people, about their needs, their abilities, the land they live on, the land they till, the food they grow, about the cities they live in, about the jobs they do, how they do them, and about the houses in which they live, about what people know and don't know, and what they ought to know to help make America still greater. And so these are the kinds of questions that I think mayors really would be thinking about and asking about as they're doing the work of addressing the challenges in their cities and thinking about their places. And so, you know, when we talk about these challenges, what is this work about? We have to think about different considerations, like creating a great sense of place, like addressing issues of equity that may exist in our communities, but also the work that it takes to sort of figure it out and sort of figure out the details, but ultimately that we're responsible for the comfort of our people and our communities. And so that work needs to happen in different ways and different scales. It can happen through your city plans and different policies, whether that's land use or transportation, but it also needs to sort of reconcile and be resolved at the scale of particular neighborhoods or buildings, and again, ultimately, the human experience. And so this is an image that, you know, scares a lot of people. This is the organization chart of the city of New York. So the people and the mayor up here at the top, but then all of the different agencies and departments that make the city work are represented. But what I've outlined here, and it's an exercise that I would encourage you as mayors to do, is think about who are all the different players that have a say or can facilitate change in the built environment or seeing design through. So that can include your sanitation department. It can include the fire agencies, the health departments even, right? So thinking about who is it that you need at the table to see a positive change in design. So obviously your governments aren't as big as New York's, but I'm sure you still have this problem, which is that people are working in silos and maybe doing things to advance their purposes, but not really working together and finding ways to make the communities better. So this is an image, I hope I'm not stealing Julia's thunder, but from Gail with work that we did in New York City to talk about how all those different agencies and departments come together to address issues of design and place, and recognizing that people really just understand their neighborhood, right? They don't know which agency is doing what or who funded what in certain person's time schedule. They think about, can I get to my downtown? Is there a great public space for me to hang out with my friends? And so this is all the work that you need to sort of coordinate to get a great public realm and therefore get a great neighborhood and a great city. But, you know, the sort of the big topic that a lot of people are sort of aware of is that COVID-19 was a major disruption. It has changed life in a lot of cities, big and large and small. And so this is a map of how COVID-19 affected New York City. The darker the color, the more incidents of cases. And so another thing I encourage you to do is to think about the geography of your city. Obviously your downtowns and main streets are important, but what are the other geographies that are impacted? So in New York, we have obviously a great diversity of people, and there is sort of a racial geography of COVID-19, and that Black and Brown and immigrant communities were more heavily affected. But it's acknowledging that that isn't just an issue of only race, it's an issue for how our cities are designed. So design matters. This is a map of the sort of aging housing in the city as of 1969 in New York. So what did you inherit in the design of your city is important. And what we learn is that these high incidences of COVID cases are actually connected to the actual design of our built environment and where we had old and aging and poor housing stock. And so recognizing this sort of difference in design of our city is key. And so, you know, during COVID, we had circumstances like this. This is Domino Park, which is a new public space built as a part of a large public-private redevelopment initiative in the Brooklyn waterfront. And so, you know, during the pandemic, you had great spaces like these where people were able to have open spaces and kind of work and interact. But the issue was that we didn't necessarily see this for all of our communities. And so in New York, we had to have some, you know, difficult conversations and work around thinking about, you know, how we were going to create new public spaces and new opportunities for people during the pandemic, both in terms of sort of the need for public and open space, but also the economic needs of sort of making sure that our restaurants and small businesses had access to a continued opportunity as the city was able to reopen. And so when you zoom in, what that looks like is the city initiated its open streets and open restaurants and now open retail programs, which were an exercise to look at the geography of the city and where there was the highest need for a different kind of approach to how we manage our public spaces and public infrastructures, and to map out and create places where the design of streets, the use of streets and public spaces could be adjusted. And so there's this map where you can find, for example, where open restaurants, where these small businesses are able to sort of work and expand on the streets. And it's created sort of a new design and a new use and a new thinking for the city that obviously addresses our issues that we're dealing with now. But in reality, it's not just dealing with issues that we're dealing with now because of COVID. They're dealing with issues that have existed for a long time in the city and needs for our public spaces in the city. So this is sort of a live drawing of a conversation that we had just the other day, actually, with our design community, the Fine Arts Federation in New York. So our architects and landscape architects and urban planners working with different people in city government and design organizations in the city to talk about how we rethink our streetscapes and our built environment for accomplishing greater equity and health. And so some of these conversations were about process, right? How do you relax and rethink regulations to make it easier for businesses to grow and expand? How do you create new spaces in communities that may not have the resources they need? But how do we also think about how we make that change, right? Change is difficult. Everybody has had to change in this time that we're in now. And so thinking about process, so communications, sharing data, thinking about engagement and empowerment strategies when doing this work, and figuring out how do you do that sort of work of having difficult conversations about equity, building trust across different types of stakeholders, and ultimately doing the work needed to bring positive impact and change to the communities. And so I just wanted to share a couple examples. There's an initiative called Neighborhoods Now that is work by our sort of design community. So the Van Allen Institute, the Urban Design Forum, and working with really a broad kind of public-private partnership to look at our city streetscapes. And so this is work that was done where they kind of mapped out these neighborhood corridors and looking at where vacant storefronts and vacant lots along a corridor could be intelligently kind of readapted and redesigned in an interim basis to serve immediate needs, but also to test out the future of these corridors and the design for how these corridors may work longer term. But there's also the work of actually just engaging and involving people, whether or not that's local businesses and stores or block associations, and of course, the design community and the people that are just interested in building and designing their neighborhoods and reimagining them in a new way to create new ways to think and occupy our neighborhoods and spaces. So this is one of the many projects under construction, public-private partnership between the local restaurants on that street and the design community to work together to create and build out some of these new spaces that then get to be enjoyed as activities for these neighborhoods. And I just wanted to end on a point that design isn't only architecture and buildings or even landscape architecture and engineering. Design can be a lot of different things and can include a lot of different types of people. And so one of the prompts here was thinking about the maintenance and care long-term of these spaces. And so things like cleanups and beautification projects have also been incorporated into this work, and acknowledging, just like in the beginning I showed who are all the agencies responsible for designing and building something, also doing the work of figuring out who are the agencies and partners responsible for making sure that you care for it long-term. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, Justin. That was really powerful, and particularly some of the graphics you were showing about housing in New York City in relations to COVID. That was really powerful stuff and really important. And thank you for that presentation.